A true crime-style story set in California. Willow Creek Drive was never meant to be remembered. It was one of those suburban streets on the outskirts of Sacramento, California, quiet, narrow, lined with identical houses and tall trees that absorbed sound. Even during the day, cars moved slowly there, as if the road itself discouraged noise. People lived close to one another, but not together. They greeted each other politely, exchanged brief smiles, and then returned to their own lives. No one asked questions, no one lingered. On Willow Creek Drive, silence was not unusual. It was expected. House number 31 fit perfectly into that pattern. That was where Daniel Carter lived. Daniel was 38 years old. He worked in IT, mostly remote contracts, jobs that required skill but little human contact. His routine was precise. Every morning at 7:40 he left the house. Every evening around 6:15 he returned. He drove an aging dark blue Toyota and parked it in the same spot every day, beneath the shadow of a tree along the curb. Daniel didn't talk much. He nodded to neighbors, exchanged short greetings, but never stayed long enough for conversation. He never argued, never laughed loudly, never complained. Some people assumed he was simply well-mannered. Others thought he was lonely. Most people didn't think about him at all. Except Emily Watson. Emily was 46 and worked as a school secretary. She wasn't suspicious by nature, but she noticed details. She noticed when routines changed. That's why the first night Daniel's house was dark, she dismissed it as nothing. The second night, she paused. The third night, she felt uneasy. Daniel never left his house completely dark. She looked out her window. No lights, no movement. His car was gone. The next morning, it was still gone. Emily told herself he might be on vacation, but the feeling didn't leave. On the fourth day, she called the police. Her voice was calm. There was no panic. "I just think someone should check on my neighbor. He hasn't been around for a few days." The call was logged with the Sacramento Police Department as a routine welfare check. That was how Detective Mark Reynolds became involved. Reynolds was 52, quiet, methodical, and uninterested in drama. He trusted patterns more than theories. When the door to number 31 was opened, Reynolds noticed the silence immediately. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of movement. Inside, everything was orderly. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the table. A blanket was neatly folded on the couch. The television was off, the remote beside it. A wall clock had stopped ticking. Nothing was broken, nothing was disturbed, except Daniel Carter was gone. At first, it looked like a voluntary disappearance, but the details didn't support that. Daniel's bank accounts showed no activity. His phone was powered off. His employer hadn't heard from him. He hadn't packed. He hadn't prepared. He had simply vanished. Reynolds reviewed Daniel's background. The file was thin. Too thin. No criminal record, no significant debts, no close friends, no active family connections. Daniel had lived quietly, almost invisibly. The case was eventually classified as a missing person. Officially, it stalled. But Reynolds couldn't let it go. Months later, a detective from San Jose called him. Her name was Sarah Collins. She was investigating a disappearance with unsettling similarities. The missing man was Michael Turner, 42, single, quiet. His home told the same story. A drink left unfinished, a stopped clock, no signs of struggle. Different city, same silence. Reynolds and Collins met. They compared files. the similarities multiplied. Both men lived alone. Both were socially withdrawn. Both disappeared without noise, violence, or witnesses. Soon, 2 more cases surfaced, one in Fresno, one in Santa Rosa. Internally, the files began to carry an informal label: the Silent House cases. It wasn't an official designation. It couldn't be. There were no bodies, no evidence of force, no crime that could be clearly charged. Just absence. What troubled Reynolds most was this: these people hadn't been dragged away. There were no signs of resistance. It was as if they had agreed to leave. That thought lingered. Then in Modesto, another disappearance occurred. Kevin Brooks, 45, IT technician, lived alone. Reynolds visited the house himself. Everything was familiar, too familiar. But this time there was something new. A piece of paper on the table. No threat, no demand, just a single sentence. Some doors close quietly. That message changed everything. This wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It was a method. Collins said it first. "These people weren't forced," she said quietly. "They were prepared." Reynolds understood. Whoever was behind this wasn't using violence. They weren't creating fear. They were exploiting isolation. These were people who already lived on the margins of connection, people whose absence would not immediately trigger alarms. The mechanism was simple and terrifying. Convince someone that leaving quietly is easier than staying. No struggle, no noise, no one notices until it's too late. Officially, nothing could be proven. Unofficially, Reynolds knew the truth. This wasn't murder. It was erasure. People weren't being removed from life. They were being removed from society. Over time, the investigation faded. Reynolds retired, Collins transferred. The files remained. Willow Creek Drive stayed quiet. Emily Watson still lived across from number 31. New residents came and went. No one stayed long. Sometimes, standing at her window at night, Emily felt that same unease. Not fear, recognition. Because silence, she now understood, is not the same as safety. There was no face to remember in this story, no single villain to describe. Only a system, a pattern, a truth people preferred not to see. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is not violence. Sometimes it's the fact that no one asks questions. And sometimes the most dangerous house is the quietest one on the street.